A bombshell email shows that Joe Biden met with an executive at Burisma, and the source of this email, well, it's strange to say the least. And the left, they seem to be turning on Nancy Pelosi. And since Amy Coney Barrett uses the word preference, Democrats are now deeming it offensive. They must have forgotten all the times that they've used it. We've got that and more, and it's coming up right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I'm Hillary Kennedy. I'm filling in for Sarah Gonzalez. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. So joining me is Elijah Schaffer, the host of Slightly Offensive. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for being the host. This is a surprise.
Well, I'm excited to meet you too because your wife has been on a couple of times the past few weeks, so now I get the other half. So
it's nice to meet you finally in person too.
Absolutely. And Jason Buttrell, the head writer and chief researcher for Glenn Beck. Glad you're back.
Thank you.
We're really going to need your expertise on this next story. It broke today, and it's a crazy one. So a smoking gun email reveals how Hunter Biden introduced a Ukrainian businessman to his vice president dad. A newly obtained email, it reveals that Joe Biden did meet with a top executive at Burisma, the Ukrainian natural gas company, when he was vice president and during his son Hunter Biden's tenure on the company's board. So the New York Post reported this today. Jason, you're kind of our expert on all things Hunter Biden.
Sadly,
so can you break this story down for us and kind of explain what's going on there?
Yeah. So this is insane on a few different levels. I'll just start off with how the shadiness of this story. Well, I completely think that this is real and all this stuff is legit, but the way it was obtained is very, very strange. And have you guys read that part of the story? So they got this laptop, which was dropped off at a repair place. It was Hunter Biden's. This person is unnamed, and the person didn't ever pay for the service, and he never came back for the laptop. But apparently, the repairman was like, hey, I'm going to take this to the FBI, and I'm going to also give a copy of it to Rudy Giuliani. Okay, it's just very, very strange.
So the only way that he knew it was Hunter Biden's or thought it belonged to someone in his camp was because it had a Beau Biden sticker on the laptop?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So, I mean, to me, that sounds very, very weird. It sounds to me like it was stolen, and I'm just theorizing, but this person was tipped off and said, hey, you should give this to the FBI, and you should also give a copy to Rudy Giuliani. I don't know. But that's the only thing that's shady on this, in my opinion. The rest of it, like you said, the email is, it shows that Joe Biden lied when he said that he never discussed his business dealings in Ukraine with Hunter. That's why there was no conflict of interest there. They weren't conversing together. But it also shows that, there was another email that the Burisma executives, and I think it was the third in command he's talking to, were looking to get political favors. They were saying, hey, what can you do about this? This is going on. And then Hunter replied and said, well, who in the Ukraine government has the most pull? It looks very, very, very bad. And I pretty much know that there's a lot more of this that's going to be coming out in the very near future, maybe even this week. But it's being suppressed like crazy. Twitter today, you can't tweet the link. Facebook, they've taken it down. They are in panic mode over this story, so that's how you know it's pretty dang important.
Well, I think that's what's making this so interesting is, Joe Biden has said, I don't know anything about what Hunter's been doing. Yep. I haven't had any interaction with anybody, but according to the Post, the email said, Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to D.C. and giving me an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. It's really an honor and a pleasure. This meeting apparently happened about 1 year after the gentleman who wrote the email asked Hunter Biden for advice on how he could use his influence to benefit Burisma.
So the Biden campaign responded to this, and they said that, basically this isn't true. We looked all through the records, and the meeting never happened. The official records, I don't think this would go on the official records.
Right.
They're trying to avoid a conflict of interest there. And it was well known within the State Department that they were conveying that to the Obama administration. There's a possible conflict of interest here. It does not look good, especially with corruption, and the Russians are going to take advantage of this. So they knew this would not be on the record at all.
Are you going to be recording when you went to Epstein Island in Barbados, right? I mean,
exactly.
This is something when you're purposely and intentionally engaging in shady activity. This is exactly what cover-ups are about. about.
Yep.
But intent, like if you look at the intent here, I think what this shows you is that just like Joe Biden saying he's not going to share specifically his ideas on court packing till after the election, and then he's saying certain things didn't happen with his son in the past, there's extremely shady things going on within the Biden family that they are intentionally trying to withhold from the public, not only because it would be a PR nightmare, but possibly because this looks like could be potentially illegal activity, right, that's going on here. But I think what makes me laugh the most is that we're seeing the way that the tech companies are colluding to interfere with the election, because Facebook says, well, we're not going to, fact check people. We're going to leave it up to third parties so that we don't have bias, right? We don't want to be an overlord over information. But they're directly stepping into the first and most recent bombshell that could make the Biden campaign look bad or even discredit Joe Biden's reputation on truthfulness. And they're coming and saying, we're already going to suppress this and take this down. I'm thinking, if there was a picture of Donald Trump Jr. smoking crack cocaine, literally, I don't even know where he seemed to be in a bed, Biden did, but when you see that, you go, that would be on every single front page. That would be the top story. That would be trending on Twitter. That's where you see the difference of the bias, is that when something bad happens on the right, it becomes elevated, even if it's not even significant. But if something significant comes out on the left, it just becomes suppressed as if it's not even existent.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, they said they weren't going to do their own fact check thing. They were just going to have the third party fact checkers. So they were there was a disconnect between the two. What was their Facebook guy tweeted today?
Yeah.
That they were going to wait until the third-party fact checkers looked into this. Then I guess, were going to let people see it. So it completely contradictory. The Twitter stuff, I guess I should have, but I didn't expect Twitter to go as far as they did.
Remember the learn to code thing? That was weird too.
Yeah,
They made a hashtag that offended and hurt the feelings of journalists become something that could permanently suspend your account. Sometimes they genuinely show the bias in the company in ways that I think it's actually just detrimental to them long term.
They blocked the New York Post actual account. You can't post that thing. They said that because they posted potentially hacked material. Now that's interesting. So I'm sure they also censored everything from Edward Snowden, everything from Julian Assange, everything from WikiLeaks. Mm-hmm. Give me a break. No, of course they didn't. This is
what
insane.
About Trump's tax records, right? Potentially stolen and illegal paperwork that no one can really verify, and Trump says isn't even true. It's like that became the national headline.
Thank you. The MSNBC, that dude was tweeting today. They're like, oh, no one should post this. This is stolen information. Whatever. No one should post this. I thought the exact same thing. The tax return that Maddow was blasting all over the place.
Well, like Elijah, like you said, also located on the computer besides these emails, there were some personal family photos and then also some explicit photographs, I believe some video maybe too, of Hunter Biden. Do you think this story, especially since it is being suppressed, do you think it's going to affect Biden at all in the polls in any way?
Oh my gosh. No, not really. I think everyone is firmly in their camp right now. I'll caveat that. I do think there's a lot of independents out there that really care. So every time you see a poll, I don't really care if it's we polled these Democrats, see how they think about this, or we polled these Republicans, see what they think, because they're in their camps and they're pretty much solidified. But I'm really interested when they say we polled independents, and that's usually a lot more fair. So I think there's a huge fight right now for those independents, the people in the middle. And I think this actually could, lead them to, switch their vote.
Well, Senator Ron Johnson told Fox News yesterday morning I believe that was this morning, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, that it is going to take up an investigation into whether former VP Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden, wielded Joe Biden's influence inappropriately in a business relationship between Hunter and Burisma. He said the committee's first order of business will be investigating and verifying the emails that they have been in contact with individuals in the chain of possession, and they're already in the process of investigating Hunter and Joe Biden's complicated relationship with Ukraine. The current report, it doesn't focus on Joe Biden, but rather implicates the full Obama administration in allegedly underhanded dealings. What are your thoughts on this investigation? Do you think it's going to turn into anything? Is this all just lip service?
This is the one we're talking about. This is not a separate investigation.
So this
right? This is from the Senate on these new emails and documents.
Right. It's the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee.
So on this, we are just now finding out about this because the New York Post, they got their hands on it. I think it was given to them by Bannon, I believe, Steve Bannon. But the FBI has had this for a while, right? So the FBI has had this. If it would have been damaging on Trump, it would have been leaked already a long time ago. As soon as the FBI would have gotten it, it would have been leaked. So the FBI's had this, they've been sitting on it. How does the Senate not already know about it? You know what I mean? Like, if I don't want to say the words deep state, but come on, guys. Like, you have this information. The Durham probe is going on. Barr and Durham are doing their things. How has no one else heard of this? Is the FBI, did they just put this in a vault and lock the door?
Well, maybe it shows you the ethical standards of different people and partisanship that perhaps the right-wing people who happen to work in law enforcement truly acknowledge and respect justice, and they know that it would be, I guess, potentially hazardous to release information and scandalous on somebody running for the president of the United States, and that it should really be fact-checked, and we should look at the legality, and especially if it was acquired unethically, and there's, problems here. I mean, this should really thoroughly be investigated before it's leaked. But you see that the leftists, even if they work in the FBI, they're so vicious and on the attack and looking for anything to take against Donald Trump that even when they work for the FBI, which you would expect them to have some sort of a respect for the institution, they're still going to cross their own institution and release the information. But as you were saying about with like this hurting, Biden in the polls, I mean, quite frankly, I don't think that it will, because most people who obtain information or are going to be voting for him are going to be getting it from networks that probably will not cover the story because we haven't fact-checked it yet. And by the time it's been fact-checked, it's irrelevant. We don't need to talk about it. This will happen on November 4th or whatever. We'll finally be able to talk about this.
After the election,
yeah. After everyone's voted, and it's like, and if it changes their mind and it continues, then it will. But I mean, it looks like nothing can really hurt Biden now, because if it does, it's just not going to get any airtime.
You do make a good point. If we have not heard a single thing from the FBI or any other authority like that, it could mean it is an active investigation, in which case they would not be able to say anything about it. Regardless if it was damaging on Trump, it would have gotten leaked.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I find it so hard to believe that the Senate is only hearing about this now.
Right.
Well,
that's just so hard.
And I don't want to be like this Hollywood movie stuff, but this could be how they're presenting it to the public. Like, I'm sure the Senate does not release all information of everything they've heard. Plus, sometimes I'm sure certain leaders in the Senate probably might know things, but to actually call a hearing is like maybe they were waiting for an investigation to be finished before calling the hearing or something like that. And then now that it's in the public, they have public pressure, obviously. Their constituents are at hand, and this is very partisan, I'm sure, this investigation too. So.
Probably waiting for October for that little surprise. That's probably what they were waiting for.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I like it. Now we got it. And maybe this was the leak. Like you said, nobody leaked it. This could have been it.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, so let's talk about their competing town halls that are going to be taking place tomorrow night. Donald Trump is going to participate in a town hall with NBC News. Joe Biden is going to be appearing in one with ABC News. Both events are scheduled for the exact same time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern.
So good.
So they were supposed to be in a face-to-face debate. That got canceled when they decided to make it a virtual debate. Donald Trump said, no way. I'm out. I'm not doing it. So now they've got these dueling town halls going on at the exact same time. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's hilarious because I'm sure Donald Trump just loved interrupting, Biden during the last debate. This was the next best thing. They can't be together, so he'll interrupt him by doing the exact same time. What's funny is I heard that NBC employees are just absolutely furious with their network for doing this.
Taking it up, yeah.
But of course they are. They're political hacks. They're not.
Now, do you think the emails from today will come up during Biden's town hall?
No, definitely not. But I do hope that someone supercuts the two events together to where every time Biden speaks that Trump interrupts him and says something more factual and better.
Oh,
I would appreciate if anybody's watching the show and your favorite meme maker or a supercutter,
such a good idea.
Tell them now to prepare to make that.
Yeah. Such a good idea.
A great idea. All right, so we've got a lot more to talk about. We have to go to break first, but first we want to thank our sponsor, Keeps. Because have you noticed that your hair, it isn't looking as full as it used to?
What are you trying to say?
I'm sorry, Jason.
I saw you looking right at me. Why would you do that?
I'm not saying you're such a handsome guy.
At least you're not wearing a hat. What's under my hat? Who knows?
That's true.
But it is hard when you're losing your hair, right? I mean, you can go to your doctor for a hair loss treatment prescription, and then you can go and visit the pharmacy and try not to go broke just to avoid going bald, or you can try Keeps from the comfort of your lazy boy at home, because you're going to get the same doctor-recommended, FDA-approved hair loss treatment, but Keeps offers the generic versions for about half the cost. And one more thing that you're going to love about Keeps, it's all online. So you just answer a few questions, you snap a few pics of your hair, and a licensed doctor will review all of your info and then recommend the right hair loss treatment for you. And then it's shipped directly to your door. So why make unnecessary trips to the doctor or the drugstore when you can do it all at home? So let's get you started with a special deal. Go to keeps.com/y for 50% off your first order of Keeps hair loss treatments. That's keeps.com/y. Keeps.com/why. We'll be back in a minute. As it turns out, most Americans are blaming Nancy Pelosi for a failure to pass a coronavirus stimulus. So there was a survey that was done. 43% of voters say Pelosi's more to blame for the lack of progress on a stimulus package. 40% blame President Trump. But the interesting thing is 45% of self-identified independents said Pelosi is more responsible for failure to reach a deal, compared to 30% who said that it was Trump's fault. So shortly after declaring all the negotiations dead, the president offered to sign a standalone bill providing Americans with another round of the $1,200 stimulus checks. And Pelosi rejected that and said, no, I don't think so. So then she got into a little conversation with Wolf Blitzer on CNN about it, and it got a little contentious. So I want to show this clip.
It's not about me. It's about millions of Americans who can't put food on the table, who can't pay the rent,
and
who are
we
having
represent
trouble,
them, and we represent them,
getting by
and we represent
these
them,
long food
and we
lines that we're
represent
seeing.
them.
I know
we
you
know
are.
them.
I'm just saying.
We represent them, and we know them.
As we
We
say,
know them. We represent them.
don't let the
Yes.
perfect be the enemy of the good, as they say
It
here
is
in
nowhere
Washington.
near perfect.
Madam Speaker.
Always the case, but we're not even close to the good.
All right, let's see what happens, because every day is critically, critically important. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you for
joining
your
us.
sensitivity to our constituents' needs.
I am sensitive to them because I see them on the street begging for food, begging for money. Madam Speaker, thank you
Have
so
you
much.
fed them? We feed them. We feed them.
All right, so why do you think Nancy Pelosi is holding off on taking the deal? She asked for $2.2 trillion. The president's offering $1.8 trillion. It would get $1,200 into the hands of the American people. Why do you think she's holding off on agreeing to a deal?
I think everyone can see it. And we've seen it from the very first stimulus package that they were trying to pass, which ultimately did pass, but all the extra ridiculous things that she put in there. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was ridiculous. Had nothing to do with coronavirus at all. And she's still pulling this crap today. What was it, like $2.2 trillion or something like that for to bail out some of these progressive hellholes?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I just go, the numbers like that only come from the government. Where
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
Where'd you get the money?
Yeah. 2.2 trillion. That's not like $2.2. You know what I mean? Trillion. Absolutely insane. Yeah. I mean, I think that, and that's interesting that it's independent voters that are noticing this as well, because I almost guarantee you that Democrats think that it's Trump's fault, Republicans think that it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. But I think sane people, and there can be sane Democrats, and I'm not saying there aren't, but there's a lot of them. I think that they're like, what the heck? Like, why are you trying to fund, some kind of museum, that was in the original one, or opera house or whatever it was, when we could get checks to people, to businesses that have had to lay off all of their employees? I mean, come on. Where's your priorities here?
Right.
Yeah, number one, I got to say this. I'm not a big fan of the government giving people money, because to me, I always look at these are just like tax incentives or something like that, because really with the amount of money most Americans, or hardworking Americans, are paying to the government, we're really just getting back money we've already given the government, per se. But that's not even true for this statement, and you think about it, because the government doesn't have any money, and they're borrowing money, and so we are paying such interest, and I'm surprised that either party somehow feels like they can give out money. And I wish the argument about stomping the checks was like a responsible one. I would have gotten or received so much praise for the first time for Nancy if she was like, hey, we need to be responsible as a government and stop spending money we don't have. Cool. But now you see the real thing is that she just has become so egotistical and prideful and wants to put so many earmarks in these things that she just clearly doesn't care about the American people. And the reason why I'll note that, it's really a sad day when CNN cares more for the American people than you. You know that there's something wrong.
Well, that brings up a really good point, because twice in the past week, we've seen CNN give some pushback. Jake Tapper did it in a conversation, and and then Nancy Pelosi, of course, with Wolf Blitzer. Do you think that the mainstream media is kind of waking up a little bit? Because
no, they're not waking up. There's a human element, right? Like I think I watched a car commercial for Chevrolet, and they were like, "Why do we build safety features in our cars? It's because we have families too," which is like a stupid thing to say because it's like whatever. But it really, like it's like CNN. Like, why is CNN pushing back? It's like, well, they are Americans as well, and as much as they want to push propaganda, and when things are at the higher level, then sure, I mean, we can talk about Trump and get back at him. But I'm sure like Wolf and people have plenty of friends. Maybe they're elitist. Maybe they own restaurants. Maybe they're on some sort of the upper class. But everyone knows somebody who's been seriously affected economically from the shutdowns, not from COVID, from the shutdowns. From the government, from COVID. So the government has ruined the country, not the disease. And that being said, it's like, I'm sure Wolf and a lot of people are getting tired of this because you can read as much as you want the bogus headlines they put out, but these guys are actually very high IQ many times, very intelligent, came from great universities, and I'm sure they know that the truth is that this virus is not worth the shutdowns that we continue to see. And so I think that an average person is going to be getting very upset for a number of reasons to where you're saying, Nancy, just cut it out. Mm-hmm. It's not bipartisan. It becomes a human concerted effort to like, you guys, we cannot keep destroying our country because eventually we're not even gonna have a network.
Right. Well, Nancy Pelosi, good grief, while we're on this conversation, a House Republican has introduced a resolution that calls for the removal of Nancy Pelosi because he says she lacks the mental fitness for the job. And now she is 81. She's a career politician who's served in the House for 33 years. Of course, she's third in line for succession of the presidency. So she's, really 2 heartbeats away from being in the White House. Anyway, Representative Doug Collins from Georgia, he just finds that unacceptable and says, it is clear that Nancy Pelosi does not have the mental fitness to serve as Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm introducing a resolution to push for her removal. Do you think he has a valid reason to push for this?
I don't know. She does seem a lot more crazy than she has in the past. What was that? Was that interview that she had not too long ago where she said like, good morning, Sunday morning? It was like in response to like an actual question. And she just like came out of nowhere. Like it was like I don't know, like she saw that on Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoons and just boom, did that.
You've never been hungover? I'm just being honest.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, she's crazy for one because she's Nancy Pelosi, but there does seem to be a kind of a Biden-esque, mental deterioration. I think it's just funny now that it's the state of our politics right now. It's like it's this tit for tat, like. We're going to do this to try to, mess with the 25th Amendment so, we can get it, easier to get a president, out of office. And then the impeachment wars, which, by the way, I think have escalated. So I think that we haven't seen the last of impeachment wars. That's going to continue on, maybe in the next administration, maybe,
Episode 7, episode 8.
Yeah, exactly.
Disney's going to buy it?
Yeah.
True.
And then take it downhill.
Yeah. It'll finally end on the 9th. Yeah.
Well, in this resolution, he did point out a couple of things like Pelosi's past actions of ripping up the State of the Union speech delivered by the president back in February.
So bad.
She did it like right in front of all the American people. And then he also noted her visiting that hair salon in San Francisco where she got that blowout and wasn't wearing her mask, even though she told everyone, you have to have a mask on at all times, and then blamed the salon for setting her up and all of that stuff.
I like this though. I'm gonna tell you this. A lot of people that are more civil and are not as much of a degenerate as I am would get very disturbed by the way politics are today. But remember, like it was just think about it. This is decades, centuries, sure, but where people in Congress stuff were shooting each other and beating each other with canes. And this is the kind of stuff where I'm like, maybe we need to get back to that because the country at least progressed, when people took it a little more seriously. I'm not calling for violence. I'm just saying, like, at least now we can see a clearer picture of who's really a good guy and who's a bad guy. And I like that. It's not like this whole idea where when you have Romney and Obama running and you can't tell the difference between who's really a Democrat, who's a Republican. They're like the same person. At least right now, when you see Biden and Trump, it's like, yeah, you might think that's crazy options, but at least you know what your options are really presenting, right? Joe Biden doesn't know where he is, and Trump knows where he's going to take America. This is a clear stance. So with Nancy Pelosi being crazy and unhinged, it is scary that she could be the president. When you said 2 heartbeats away from, I thought you were going to say something much more sinister, but I forgot BlazeTV is a respectable show on the network. But I was going to say that, but hey, the government is full of a lot of crazies. At least she's honest enough to show it.
Right.
What's crazy is before you could not really tell, because the politicians were a lot better at being politicians.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to respect Bernie Sanders than it is, I don't know, like Chuck Schumer or or Nancy Pelosi even, because I think that they would do anything at all. I think they would sell their kids if they could, if it gave them points, or gave them leverage. But they won't let that out in the open. Bernie Sanders just lays it all out in the open. At least we know what he stands for.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know what Trump stands for. You know
Yeah,
what
AOC. I love AOC. I'm like,
you know where she stands.
Yeah, I love when she's like, we need to ban all like airplanes. I'm going, hey, you know what? You said it. You sound like an idiot, but you said it. Like at least you couldn't pay me to stand up there and say something like that. You probably would have to believe it in order to say it, and she probably does. And so it's like these kind of people are insane, and I think it's giving clear-thinking Americans. That's where I think the right wing is slowly just becoming a conglomerate of individuals who apply their lives to common sense and critical thinking. And that's all it's become now.
She finally had the guts to talk about the danger of cow farts. And finally someone said it. You know what I mean? Finally someone said it out.
We've all been
Raise her
waiting.
hands in like a southern accent or something, like some new accent she made up. I don't know.
Well, you're right. I mean, we do like when we know what we're getting. But when we come back, we're going to talk about what you may not have expected from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. We have all that. We come right back. Things are just getting ridiculous with the dictionary. We used to know what you were getting with the dictionary. Well, it is so 2020 to think about the Merriam-Webster dictionary getting heavily involved in politics in some way. This is such a bizarre story to me. So suddenly, after Judge Amy Coney Barrett used the term sexual preference in her confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court on Tuesday, Democrats started slamming her for using that term, and then Merriam-Webster declared the term preference could be offensive. So Steve Krakauer, the executive producer of Megyn Kelly's podcast, he noticed as recently as last month, Webster's dictionary included a definition of preference as orientation or sexual preference. Today, when that happened, they changed it and added the word offensive. So Democrats must have forgotten how often they've actually used this word. The Washington Free Beacon put together a montage showing how often they've used it. Let's listen to this.
You use the term sexual preference to describe those in the LGBTQ community. And let me make clear, sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term.
This time, bring everybody along, regardless of color, sexual preference.
Based on whatever color, what their sexual preference might be.
By race, by age, by sexual preference.
Doesn't matter what your sexual preference is.
What their sexual preference is.
Never in the course of her military career had anything about her sexual preference had any impact.
Based upon race, color, or preference or sexual preference.
I don't think that you use the term sexual preference as just, I don't think it was an accident.
Our society has come to respect people, whatever their sexual preference.
So
That's the best one right there. It's like, got him.
right there at the end, yeah. Well, so this isn't the first time that Webster's dictionary has responded to pressure to change a listing in their text. After a 22-year-old woman made a complaint about the definition of the word racism, the dictionary said it would change its text to include a broad and more systemic understanding of the term. Okay, first of all, have either of you ever heard that the word preference is offensive before today?
I got to see this myself.
Oh, you're going to look it up?
Never. Welcome to 1984. You know what I mean? They can change the meaning of words if they want to. It's absolutely ridiculous. We were talking in the break. Like societal whims don't change words. They just don't. This is ridiculous. But what's even more ridiculous, I was starting to rage on Twitter on this because I was watching this go down. And how they're trying to make it seem like Amy Coney Barrett, because she's conservative, hates gay people. And that is the most ridiculous smear from the left. I cannot believe it worked. Absolutely insane. And Republicans, shame on you for letting them do that to you. How did if I was a senator, I would have just point blank when it was my turn to ask her a question, I would have said, look, the question is, as we're Republicans, but as per the Constitution and per the law of the land, should government have anything to do with marriage at all? Okay, now that is the conservative stance. That is the conservative stance. If they would have done that 20 years ago, there would be no narrative that they could throw at us that conservatives hate gay people. It's absolutely ridiculous. Of course, conservatives want the least amount of government involved in our lives. That's why we're conservative. That includes marriage. Obviously, we don't care who you marry. You know, we're not going to step into anything. But that also includes small businesses. You know, we're not going to tell them what they can or can't do or who they can or can't serve. That also goes towards religious institutions. We're not going to enforce our will on them. There's a constitutional protection for them. Right. But conservatives are always forced to play in their game. And I'm so tired of it. And they never take the initiative. Sorry, I'm preaching, but I'm just pissed off at it.
It's true, though. I think the best part about all of this is dictionary.com is now everyone's preferred choice for the dictionary because they still haven't changed it. But I will say this, that the preference, too, I pointed out to an MSNBC journalist, or I guess producer, I said, when it comes to sexual preference, I go, that's a very vague word. I go, because I thought, and this is, people that don't watch my show don't know that I spend too much time in very far extreme left circles of the internet, is that sexual preference is actually the more correct term according to the current narratives of social justice warriors and radical left-wing people. And this is why. Because there's this constant ideology about sexual fluidity, that it's just like autism, and people say it's a spectrum, we're all on it, right? There's a move as progress to say, you are not defined by your sexual choices, right? That's the idea with rape culture too, of saying like, you are not defined by that. And then they go, also, remember, even if you were married and you were in a straight relationship, maybe you felt straight until you were 40, but now you prefer the same sex. You have the right to do that. You do not owe allegiance to anyone. And on top of that, I'll bring this out. We have this new thing in our culture called the Bisexual Awareness Week or Bisexual Pride Week. Everything has a week, right? And one thing that I know when I was making an episode on that, and I was researching a lot of this push, there's a lot of push in our culture right now to decriminalize socially bisexuality, right? They go, oh, you can be bisexual and you can, date the opposite sex or the same sex and this and that. And one thing I noticed in their rhetoric the whole time is sometimes your preference changes. Sexual preference is fluid. And these are from Out and different organizations that are about pink news. These are gay organizations that are about pushing their sex positive, LGBTQ positive agenda, and they use the idea constantly as a positive term of changing what you prefer as being a sense of empowerment. And so in fact, I want to give it to Amy and say, good on you for being the most progressive person in that room and not being an elitist establishment Democrat who's out of touch with the radical progressive culture. I'm so glad that she spends time in the weird corners of Instagram watching these AJ Plus videos that are like propaganda, because really, truly, if we talk about sexuality, I'll just end with this. There's a gay journalist named Andy No, who I'm hosting right now at my home, and we're working on some projects together. And he said, he heard the comments and he goes, sexual preference. He's from Portland, by the way, too. So they go beyond sexual preference. They go into things even no one would prefer. He says, yeah, that's very in line with Portland culture, like progressive culture. We use sexual preference all the time to define this. And you're going, it's a gay man. I'm going to take his word from a very gay city, Portland, to then this woman from Hawaii who, quite frankly, I don't know what her problem is, but she's always smoking something.
Well, it's like they're trying to get anything they possibly can on her, and they just haven't had much success. I know we don't have very much time. I just want to play one clip really quickly of her responding to the attacks that she's received on her having children of color.
All right, I'm going to finish this housekeeping because I want to talk about the law. I want to give you a chance to respond to something.
Theatrics.
Some butthead professor at Boston University says that because you and your husband have 2 children of color, that you're a white colonist. The implication is that you're a racist and that you use your 2 children as props. Do you use your children as props?
Senator Kennedy, it was the risk of people saying things like that, which would be so hurtful to my family, that when I told Senator Graham this morning that my husband and I had to really weigh the costs of this, it was saying deeply offensive and hurtful things that are not only hurtful to me, but are hurtful to my children, who are my children, who we love, and who we brought home and made part of our family. And accusations like that are cruel.
All right, so just real quickly before we have to go to break, how do you think she's doing so far handling some of these? I mean, they're tossing stuff at her left and right. How do you think she's doing?
I think she's killing it.
Yeah.
She hasn't responded to questions she shouldn't respond to, and she's been right on the money, recalling everything. She's been pretty impressive.
She's sober, and she has that ahead of at least Nancy there. She's definitely sober-minded, and you can see it kind of makes you actually wonder if making good choices your entire life and following your faith might actually create and make you a balanced person. I don't know, food for thought.
Might pay off. All right, so we got to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Day of Rage in Portland. I definitely want to get your take on this.
The Day of Rage, oh yeah. We got some good stuff.
Well, I feel like every day, every week, we have a new story about something else going on in Portland that is out of control. And Portland had a Day of Rage protest, which happened on Monday. It just rampaged through the city, targeting statues of controversial historical figures like Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt. It began with a group looking to decolonize society and abolish colonial systems that promote racism, according to them. And we've got a clip of the protesters tearing down the Roosevelt statue.
All you colonizers, every single one of you that's against Black Lives Matter can the off. We're done with colonizers. Indigenous people are done with colonizers.
So these groups, I mean, they have a pretty clear call to action on social media, but law enforcement and Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, they say the people who are committing these acts of violence and destruction, that they may be hard to identify and to arrest. Even the people who broke into the Oregon Historical Museum and they stole a priceless artifact. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You've been involved in these riots and these protests and been like right in the thick of it. Do you
I was just there, yeah. I was literally just there, and I'll tell you about this. You know why you didn't see that statue fall? Because they, meaning Antifa, this event was planned for multiple days. The police knew about it, the city knew about it, and they didn't do anything to stop it. This was, first, number one, allowed by the city to occur. Number two, the press, including actual mainstream publications, were complicit with it who were there, because Antifa set out rules that you could not film the actual toppling of the statues, and you couldn't film the people doing it, which is why the angle looks the way it does. And there is even someone who does bylines for the New York Times that was there, Sergio Olmos, and he abided by Antifa's rules for press. So that's very problematic. He has over 100,000 followers on Twitter, and he is, working for the local publication in Portland. This is the kind of people that I'm talking about that are working with Antifa to tell a different narrative. Even on top of that, that was a car in a public park that they brought in to topple it. They were pulling it down, and this happened for quite a while. It was very difficult to remove, and police could have showed up. The location was known, and things were being live streamed, and they didn't intervene. But most importantly, so you see this is like systemic from the top down. This is being permitted, but it gets even worse because a congressional candidate named Amanda Sieb, I think I pronounced her name right, verified on Twitter, admitted to participating in this online and to being a part of this tearing down the statues. Not suspended on Twitter, no action taken, not even temporary, no legal action taken, and this is the point. These people are getting into office. They are moving into office, and on with this, we know who they are. They admitted online of who's involved in this. It's not hard to identify them. They purposely don't interact, but we are in a worse position because the woman, Sarah Inaroni, running for mayor, that famously said, "I am Antifa," has been seen wearing skirts with genocidal and homicidal dictators like Mao Zedong and glorifying them, which Andy Ngo on my podcast that just came out today said that's like a right-winger wearing Hitler on their dress. Like, what the heck? She's 11 points ahead of the current mayor. So Antifa very, very, very possibly will become the mayor of Portland that's why this happened.
Well, and it's not just in Portland. And I'm really glad to hear your detail of it, because that's so shocking that, I mean, everybody knows what's going on, nothing's being done. Well, it's not just in Portland now, it's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This also happened where demonstrators tore down an obelisk in downtown Santa Fe. Yeah. The monument's been in Santa Fe Plaza since 1868. We've got a clip of that as well. So this was a monument paying homage to Union veterans. It was dedicated also to the heroes who have fallen in the various battles with savage Indians in the territory of New Mexico. The word savage has been chiseled off.
Why?
What are your thoughts of them about them
I'm
tearing
sorry, I'm
down
laughing.
to a Union Veterans Memorial?
It's not funny, but it is funny because this is madness. It's like a video game, and that's why they're against colonization. That's what people say, oh, why'd they tear down a Lincoln statue? This is against colonial history. So they believe about erasing colonial history, similar to what the Spanish did to Filipino history, where they kind of came in, and now the Philippines have become so much like Hispanic culture, even with, with just so similar in so many ways, even in religion and everything. They're essentially trying to deconstruct the entire culture and society. And so that's why they're attacking museums, which, by the way, are mostly curated by very liberal and progressive people, if you find out, and have very skewed perspectives on history. They want to erase this and inspire people to a revolution. And this is what they want to do. Keith Olbermann was on air just talking about how we need to prosecute Trump supporters, prosecute Trump, and we need to remove them from society. And this is that revolution. And you guys worked on the whole Color Revolution specials, amazing work. Fantastic, by the way. But they want to erase history, and they want to establish this new order that I don't think they're ever going to acquire, because I think the New World Order would be established before theirs.
Yeah, my first thought is just to laugh and say, what were you expecting to solve with this? Like, oh, yeah, you solved it, whatever problem, when it came down, it's all done, go, pack out the bags. The problem is, I agree with Elijah, I think that you got to ask, what is the follow-up to this? What are they looking for, for the next steps? What are you setting up here? Like, are you building something? Are you trying to push people into doing something? Like a lot of the stuff with I don't know. You probably know a lot more about this, but like all the when they're tearing down statues in places like in Portland and on the West Coast, and then you look at like the Cascadia secession movement. And have you heard about that?
No, you are a much brighter person than I am.
That is nuts, because that kind of it's Oregon, it's parts of Northern California, it's that little area. There's actually a secession movement over there. And they're serious. They actually want to secede from the Union. It started with I think it was like a bunch of like Native American type of like kind of like the one in New Mexico there. But then it's expanded to environmentalists and a lot of environmental groups, a lot of like hardcore like let's go shut stuff down type of environmental groups, that type of people. And then you start seeing stuff like when what we pointed out in that show in the Transition Integrity Project. They actually named Cascadia by name. They say using leverage during the election to help to say, hey, Cascadia, they say Cascadia will split apart from the Union. California will split into 2 or 3 different states, as well as making new states in D.C. and Puerto Rico. I mean, I'm using all this as an example to say there is a plan here. There is a method here. And whether it's just to use all that as a threat to get what they want, or to eventually try and get that, regardless. So either way you look at it, they want the fundamental transformation of the country.
Gosh,
it's crazy.
It is crazy. All right, we've got to go to break. When we come back, we'll have our question of the day. Stick around. All right, so yesterday we asked you, what do you like least about Kamala Harris? Her laugh, her prosecutorial record, her policies, her plans. You said her policies at 42%. And then today, our question is, who's given the most ridiculous performance at Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing so far? Was it Amy Klobuchar, Mazie Hirono, Cory Booker, or Sheldon Whitehouse?
Oh my gosh.
It's hard to choose, right?
It's hard to choose between Hirono. Klobuchar was they tie to me, Klobuchar and Hirono.
I just have to say that Cory Booker is one of the most unlikable people in the
gosh.
United States.
Oh my gosh.
And every time he talks, I'm just counting the seconds until it ends.
All right, so if people want to follow you guys, find out more about you, where can they go?
At Jason Butchell, Twitter.
Perfect.
Go to blazetv.com/Elijah.
Thank you guys for being here. This was so much fun.
Thanks.
Well, that's cool. So how long have you known Andy?
Andy and I became friends